In June 323 BC, Alexander became gravely ill. Everybody, Alexander included, knew that Alexander is not going to survive. So the generals asked him, Alexander, who is going to succeed you? Cocky as ever, Alexander replied, the strongest. This puzzling answer initiated a series of plots, conspiracies, and assassinations that would put Game of Thrones to shame. The most legal claim to the throne was that of Philip III, the half-brother of Alexander. However, Philip was a little bit half-witted. He had an accident as a child and that left him with some mental disabilities. The rumor has it that the mother of Alexander, Olympias, was involved in this accident. According to the gossip, the rumor, the conspiracy if you want, Olympias poisoned the young child in the previous battle with the successors. The one that Alexander won, and he eventually became the king of the Macedon. In any case, the best claim to the throne would be that of Alexander's son, and Alexander's wife, Roxanne, was pregnant at the time. However, nobody knew. Is Roxanne going to have a boy? Is he going to have a girl? Is the child going to be healthy overall? In any case, the young child would need an advisor. The young child would need a regent. The king regent who was elected in the partition of Babylon was Perdiccas. Perdiccas was a fantastic candidate. He was about Alexander's age, he was an esteemed commander, and he was the number 2 of Alexander following the death of Hephaestion. Hephaestion was the beloved friend of Alexander. Although this election, if you want, came with a fragile consensus, it was not without conflict. Case in point, Meleager. Meleager had a particular personality. He was an esteemed soldier, he was an officer in Alexander's army, but he was never promoted to the ranks. The Roman historian Justin quotes Meleager saying the following statement: "It is unlawful that kings should be chosen for Macedonians from the blood of those kingdoms they had overthrown." Well, basically what Meleager was saying is that I'm not willing to accept a king who is not a fully blooded Macedonian. Perdiccas dealt with the situation very quickly and with a very elegant way. So first of all, he approached Meleager and he convinced him that Meleager would have a saying in the decision making. And following that, he gained the trust of Philip III. With an excuse of a general review of the military, he assembled the troops. He asked from Philip to order the arrest and punishment of the mutineers of the previous weeks. Meleager was arrested and executed. Perdiccas had won his first battle. However, the news of Alexander's death spread around the empire very quickly. In the eastern part of the empire, about 20,000 Macedonian soldiers, they abandoned their spots and they were marching back to Macedonia. At the same time, in Greece, a coalition of some Greek city-states under the leadership of Athens was formed. They wanted to go against the Macedonian rule. So Perdiccas had a couple of problems to solve, and he dealt with them one by one. Let's see how. First, he sent Python, one of Alexander's somatophylaces, the bodyguards of Alexander, to deal with the situation in the east. Second, he asked from Antipater, the king regent of Macedonia, in the absence of Alexander in Asia, to deal with the situation in Greece. And then finally, he wanted to deal with a problem that not even Alexander was able to fully deal with. And here we have the introduction of a surprising character, Evmenes. Evmenes was the secretary of King Philip II and the secretary of Alexander. However, Evmenes didn't have any experience as a general. That's why Perdiccas sent another of his generals, Leonatus, to assist him. Leonatus headed with 20,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry to Cappadocia. In addition to that, Perdiccas asked Antigonus, the satrap of Phrygia, to help establish Evmenes as the satrap of Cappadocia and Paphlagonia. So far so good for Perdiccas. But this is where things start turning around. He would have to face a series of treasons and subordinations. Let's take things one by one. So first, although Python dealt with the situation in the east, here things got a little bit complicated. Either because his troops wanted to loot the other Macedonian troops, or because Python wanted to take these Macedonian troops in his own side and go against Perdiccas, these Macedonian soldiers were butchered. Following this event, Perdiccas never fully trusted Python again. On the other side of the map, Antipater failed to subdue the revolution and he was retreated in a city called Lamia. He was now under siege. Now finally, when Leonatus was heading to Cappadocia, he received a letter from Cleopatra. Not Cleopatra of Egypt, Cleopatra, the sister of Alexander. In fact, the only full-blooded sister of Alexander, and she was extending her hand to marriage if Leonatus was to go to Pella. Now pay attention, things are going to get really complicated. Leonatus had everything. He was young, he was an esteemed commander, he was ambitious, and in a very swift, elegant, chest-made move, he could have it all. So his plan was head to Greece, save Antipater, take the girl, take the glory, take the throne of Alexander. Hearing about this, Antigonus was in no mood to deal with the situation by himself. Very quickly, the news arrived to Perdiccas, and he realized that he had to deal with the situation by himself. So he started marching to Cappadocia. At the same time, Perdiccas realized that he needs alliances, and he agreed to marry the daughter of Antipater, Nikeia. She was already in her way to Babylon. From now on, we have a series of events that will be devastating for the successors of Alexander. This is what happened. Perdiccas was able to deal with the situation very quickly, and he established Eumenes to his position as satrap. Following that, he headed to Phrygia to deal with subordination of Antigonus. Now we have a series of events that get things a little bit complicated. Now, first of all, Leonatus died in the battle, and Cleopatra extended her offer to Perdiccas. Perdiccas, hearing about this new offer, this upgraded offer, he agreed to marry Cleopatra and he asked for a little bit of time so that he deals with Nikeia. These news were intercepted by Antigonus, who, hearing about the situation and in an attempt to escape the punishment of Perdiccas, headed to save Antipater. With the help of Antigonus and Craterus, Antipater managed to subdue the revolution. And then, hearing about the new information, he decided to go against Perdiccas and he formed an alliance to do so. By that point, Perdiccas was still unaware of the situation. He was in Babylon, Nikeia was arriving, and as it was agreed, he sent the dead body of Alexander back to Macedonia. This is where Ptolemy enters the battle. Ptolemy intercepted the dead body of Alexander nearby Syria and he took it back to Memphis. He joined the alliance of Antipater and that officially started the first battle of the Diadochi. So Perdiccas decided to deal with Ptolemy by himself and he asked from Eumenes to stop Antipater's advance. At the beginning, Eumenes was, what the hell, man, I'm just a secretary. But he obeyed Perdiccas. Perdiccas, with the support of Python, he headed to Egypt. He was expecting to find Ptolemy unprepared. He wanted to make a very quick crossing of the Nile during the day. But Ptolemy was prepared, and there was a series of barracks by the river. He marched his army further south, in a place called Camel's Rampant. He tried to storm the fort, but Ptolemy was quick enough and he reinforced the fortress. After a very intense battle with many casualties for both sides, Perdiccas had no choice but to retreat. He marched as quickly as he could throughout the night further south in an attempt to make a final crossing. He positioned his horses and elephants against the stream of the water so that he could level down the depth of the river. He moved his infantry to a small island halfway to the other side. The strategy seemed to be working until the weight of all these animals disturbed the soil and deepened the water. Some of the soldiers managed to make it back, but only the good swimmers, because some of them were either drowned or eaten by crocodiles. Perdiccas' officers had enough. Python, Antigenes, and Seleucus paid their commander-in-chief a visit to his tent. That night, Perdiccas was assassinated. However, on the other side of the battlefield, Eumenes had surprisingly managed to win a battle against Craterus. Antipater had split his army. He let Craterus deal with Eumenes, and his intention was to join Ptolemy in order to assist him. However, Antipater, hearing about the defeat of Perdiccas, headed to Babylon. There we have the partition of Triparadissus. We have the new rearrangement of the empire in which Antipater was proclaimed the new regent. At the same time, Antigonus was proclaimed the supreme commander of the Macedonian army. However, some of Perdiccas' forces were still at large. His brother Alcetas and also Eumenes had survived. Antigonus was tasked to deal with the problem. The battles between Antigonus and Eumenes are going to be the topic of our next week's episode. It's going to be the topic of the second battle of the Diadochi. So this was our episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our channel, join us, become an honest explorer, and I will be here next week with a brand new episode to help you all discover your inner explorers.